Hi, everyone. I think I went through more than half of my life before I ever saw a real person, not an actor in a movie, but a real person dying. And now almost everyone in our country, every adult in our country, has watched a video of a police officer with his neck upon a fellow human being. And in a certain sense, all of us have felt some level of trauma in watching someone die at the hands of another human being, and in particular, a human being that many of us were taught to trust. And so we're right now having to come to terms with some pretty deep rethinking. I'm sad to say some folks just brush it away. They don't let it get through to them. But I think a lot of us, we're trying to let it get through to us. We're trying to understand what's actually going on in our world. We're trying to see through deceptions and cover-ups, and we're trying to actually see clearly what's going on. Of course, we all know the word contemplation is deeply connected to the word seeing. We're trying to see. And then in seeing, we're trying to not be controlled by our reactivity, where we just react with a judgment. I agree, I disagree, I like, I dislike, that's me, that's not me, that's us, that's not us. We're trying to get beyond that kind of reactionary, dualistic thinking. We're trying to hold the humanity of that police officer and his fellow officers who were complicit in what happened. We're trying to hold the humanity of George Floyd and now too many other stories of Black men and others being shot in the back, being treated as less than human, certainly less than equals. We're trying to hold all of this humanity and all of this pain. And sometimes that's fatiguing, and sometimes that's tiring. And sometimes I think if we take it truly seriously, it's just hard to bear. And so in my own practice, what I continually, repeatedly try to do is I try to, in a sense, if you think of a camera, I try to open the aperture. And in some way, I realize that my own aperture is very narrow, but if I expand, I try to join God in God's widest aperture, and just in a sense to back away from my own little vision and to join God in God's vision of compassion and justice. Knowing somehow that God isn't susceptible to my little reactivities and my little dualisms, but to join God in God's healing love for this world. And I hope that all of us can resist the temptation to just swat these things away and just try to minimize them. But to the degree we're able to let our heart be joined with God's heart, as God's heart breaks for this world, as God's heart groans for this world, as God's heart laments and dreams and desires for a better world. If every time we see this agony that's going on in our country and in our world, an agony with long, deep, complex historical roots, an agony that has been papered over and that religious and political leaders have minimized. And if we can just let this reality sink in, well, I think of that definition that Richard often uses for contemplation, that contemplation is opening ourselves to see as much reality as we can bear, and in some way to join our heart with God's heart, our eyes with God's eyes in doing that. If that happens, I don't doubt that we will become better people through this process. And then our very presence and existence will just nudge the world one person more toward a better future. May that be for me, may that be for you, for all of us together.